Hey, hope you're doing good. So we're going to take a look at the story, The Winter's Tale from Shakespeare. And this was a really enjoyable read for me. There's a lot of characters in it, but the storyline, if you think through it and analyze like what we're going to do today, we're going to be inspired by some word study and looking at the meaning of names. Then we're going to draw some conclusions about the possible deeper meaning to the story, and I just hope you enjoy it. So I would have posted this earlier if you're waiting for it, because I mentioned earlier in my last video that I was going to post this today as well, and I would have posted it earlier, but my phone battery has been drained, and so I've had to wait and let that charge. And I spent some time watering my flowers and trying to water the grass and get the dry spots to fill in before it goes dormant. So lots of fun, and I definitely don't have a green thumb, so and it's still really hot down here in the south too, so I've switched to water and finished coffee for the day. So okay, let's take a look at the story. So The Winter's Tale, this story has a lot of really interesting elements. It's a story of being lost, of being found. It's a story of a lot of the common human trials and tribulations of passion and feelings and jealousy and and in the end, like all good fairy tales, a happy ending, reconciliation and peace and all good things, right? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at it. I'm going to read bits and pieces of it. I'm not going to read the entire story. I'm just going to choose some specific excerpts and share that with you. And then we'll pause and we'll go through and we'll analyze some of the names and take a look at the meaning overall. Okay, so I hope you enjoy it. And this is going to be from the Charles and Mary Lamb edition. And it's called Tales from Shakespeare. So let's take a look. If you happen to have this book, it's going to be on page 35, The Winter's Tale. So in looking up these names at the back of the book, before I dive into the story, it actually shows the pronunciation, and I believe I'm pronouncing these right, but if I'm not, please forgive me. Please overlook it, and I hope you still get the gist of the story. So we're going to look at the first three characters. Leontes, who is the king of Sicily, his wife, who is Hermione, and we have Leontes' friend, Polixenes. It's really interesting because typically I go off my first impression of how to pronounce the names, and I have found that that's usually fairly close. Not always, but in this case, I thought I'm really going to make use of the guide in the back of the book, and we'll see how this works. So, okay. Leontes, king of Sicily, and his queen, the beautiful and virtuous Hermione, once lived in the greatest harmony together. So happy was Leontes in the love of this excellent lady that he had no wish ungratified, except that he sometimes desired to see again and to present to his queen his old companion and schoolfellow Polixenes, king of Bohemia. Leontes and Polixenes were brought up together from their infancy, but being, by the death of their fathers, called to reign over their respective kingdoms, they had not met for many years, though they frequently interchanged gifts, letters, and loving embassies. At length, after repeated invitations, Polixenes came from Bohemia to the Sicilian court to make his friend Leontes a visit. At first, this visit gave nothing but pleasure to Leontes. He recommended the friend of his youth to the queen's particular attention, and seemed, in the presence of his dear friend and old companion, to have his felicity quite completed. They talked over old times. Their school days and their youthful pranks were remembered, and recounted to Hermione, right, the queen, who always took a cheerful part in these conversations. This is when things make a turn for the worse. When after a long stay, Polixenes was preparing to depart, Hermione, at the desire of her husband, joined her entreaties to his, that Polixenes would prolong his visit. And now began this good queen's sorrow. For Polixenes, refusing to stay at the request of Leontes, was won over by Hermione's gentle and persuasive words to put off his departure for some weeks longer. Upon this, although Leontes had so long known the integrity and honorable principles of his friend Polixenes, as well as the excellent disposition of his virtuous queen, he was seized with an ungovernable jealousy. Every attention Hermione showed to Polixenes, though by her husband's particular desire, and merely to please him, increased the unfortunate king's jealousy, and from being a loving and true friend, and the best and fondest of husbands, Leontes became suddenly a savage and an inhuman monster. Sending for Camillo, one of the lords of his court, and telling him of the suspicion he entertained, he commanded him to poison Polixenes. Camillo was a good man, and he, well knowing that the jealousy of Leontes had not the slightest foundation in truth, instead of poisoning Polixenes, acquainted him with the king his master's orders, and agreed to escape with him out of the Sicilian dominions. And Polixenes, with the assistance of Camillo, arrived safe in his own kingdom of Bohemia, where Camillo lived from that time in the king's court, and became the chief friend and favorite of Polixenes. The flight of Polixenes enraged the jealous Leontes still more. He went to the queen's apartment, where the good lady was sitting with her little son Mamillus, who was just beginning to tell one of his best stories to amuse his mother, when the king entered, and taking the child away, sent Hermione to prison. Mamillus, though but a very young child, loved his mother tenderly, and when he saw her so dishonored, and found she was taken from him to be put in prison, he took it deeply to heart, and drooped and pined away by slow degrees, losing his appetite and his sleep, till it was thought his grief would kill him. The king, when he had sent his queen to prison, commanded Cleomenes and Dion, two Sicilian lords, to go to Delphos, there to inquire of the oracle at the temple of Apollo, if his queen had been unfaithful to him. When Hermione had been a short time in prison, a little daughter was born to her, and the poor lady received much comfort from the sight of her pretty baby. And she said to it, "My poor little prisoner, I am as innocent as you are." So we'll pause here and take a look at these names. And I just want to share a disclaimer that I didn't look up every name in the story. So some of these I'm just kind of, ad-libbing, I guess you might say, or just taking, it's probably not the right word, taking my best guess at how to pronounce these. So, okay, so as far as the meaning of the names, we have Leontes, right? Or Leontes. And this is related to a town in eastern Sicily. I don't know if this is still true like now in today's time, or if it was just back in the day. But in my handy Latin English dictionary, that's where I looked this up. And so I found that. And then Leo, of course, we know is related to a lion, right? And then we have Hermione, the queen, which is related to Hermes, and is related to the meaning of a messenger. And then we have Polixenes, his best friend, right? Or so he thought. And I couldn't find anything on this name. I looked it up in the dictionary. It's not there, as far as I remember. And online, it's just related to the story in particular. And a lot of times you'll find these old Greek names will be interchangeable between different stories, fables, myths, legends, even between different gods, in the past. So you may find that when you're doing your research. But as far as Polixenes, I looked up P-O-L, and it said in the dictionary here related to Pollux, P-O-L-L-U-X. And also, I thought I'm going to break down the spelling of this word, Polixenes. It's P-O-L-I, And you have Poli, meaning polished or smooth, and then you have Polixenes, Polixenes. So I looked at the last part of the name, Xenes. The closest related word I could find in Latin was Xenium, Xenium, meaning gift, present given by a guest to a host, or by a host to a guest. And I thought that's very appropriate with the king and queen of Sicily hosting Polixenes, right? He was their guest. And so I also thought it was cool that it's related to a polished or a smooth gift. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I love looking at the meaning of these names and see how that plays into the story. It's always related. So then we have Camillo, who's very smart, and he's like, I don't know what's up, but this is not, I think it even said, it's not founded in truth. You know, Leontes, where he was going with his jealousy and his imagination. So Camillo is related to Camilla, meaning warrior, and it's specified Camilla being recorded as a female warrior, an ally of Turnus against Aeneas. I'm not sure as far as those names and the story related, but I think we can draw from this the meaning of warrior, Camillo being a warrior. So, and we're going to see how this plays out as the story progresses too. All right, so from here, let me go ahead and share a few more names and then we'll read the next part. We haven't met these characters yet, but you're going to see Paulina. Paulina is Hermione's best acquaintance, friend. I would say friend, but she, I believe, is in a role within the kingdom that is of service to the queen. So, but you're going to see she's a woman of great integrity. So Paulina, if you look up P-A-U as well as P-A-U-L, and I was specifically looking at the Latin portion of the dictionary here, it's related to a little, or little by little, or briefly. So, and there's a lot of words that start that way that have very similar meanings to that. And then we have an oracle that is called upon. Well, we're going to see how Leontes sins. I think I've already read. Yes, he commanded Cleomenes, and I haven't looked that name up, and Dion, yeah, I have to, I forgot. We're going to look at those at the end. But he commanded these two their two Sicilian lords to go to Delphos, there to inquire of the oracle at the temple of Apollo. Okay, so oracle at the temple of Apollo. Apollo is known as the son of Jupiter and Latona, twin brother of Diana, god of the sun, divination, archery, healing, poetry, and music. So those are the meanings associated with Apollo. Okay, so let's take a look at part 2. So it says Paulina took the newborn infant because she met with Hermione and she was grieving with her, and she understood, the situation she was in, and she just had this newborn baby girl, and so Paulina was trying to help. Okay, so Paulina took the newborn infant, and forcing herself into the king's presence, notwithstanding her husband, fearing the king's anger, endeavored to prevent her. She laid the babe at its father's feet, and Paulina made a noble speech to the king in defense of Hermione, and she reproached him severely for his inhumanity, and implored him to have mercy on his innocent wife and child. But Paulina's spirited remonstrances, I'm not sure on that word, y'all, sorry, only aggravated Leontes' displeasure, and he ordered her husband, this is Paulina's husband, and Antigonus, I hope I'm saying that right, probably not, to take her from his presence. Okay, so when Paulina went away, she left the little baby at its father's feet, thinking when he was alone with it, he would look upon it and have pity on its helpless innocence. The good Paulina was mistaken, for no sooner was she gone than the merciless father ordered Antigonus, Paulina's husband, to take the child and carry it out to sea, and leave it upon some desert shore to perish. Antigonus, unlike the good Camillo, too well obeyed the orders of Leontes, for he immediately carried the child on shipboard and put out to sea, intending to leave it on the first desert coast he could find. So firmly was the king persuaded of the guilt of Hermione that he would not wait for the return of Cleomenes and Dion, whom he had sent to consult the oracle of Apollo at Delphos. But before the queen was recovered from her lying in and from her grief for the loss of her precious baby, he had her brought to a public trial before all the lords and nobles of his court. When all the great lords and judges and all the nobility of the land were assembled together to try Hermione, and that unhappy queen was standing as a prisoner before her subjects to receive her judgment, Cleomenes and Dion entered the assembly and presented to the king the answer of the oracle, sealed up. And Leontes commanded the seal to be broken, and the words of the oracle to be read aloud, and these were the words: Hermione is innocent, Polixenes blameless, Camillo a true subject, Leontes a jealous tyrant, and the king shall live without an heir, if that which is lost be not found. So I thought that was pretty cool, and we're going to take a look at the rest of the story, obviously, and see how everything plays out. But this poor woman, having her brand new infant taken away, and grieving from that, and being imprisoned, and then now being taken to court to be tried and judged by her own husband. Can you even imagine? Pretty wild story. So it says the king would give no credit to the words of the oracle. He said it was a falsehood invented by the queen's friends, and he desired the judge to proceed in the trial of the queen. But while Leontes was speaking, a man entered and told him that the prince Mamillus, this is his son, right? Hearing his mother was to be tried for her life, struck with grief and shame, had suddenly died. Hermione, upon hearing of the death of this dear, affectionate child who had lost his life, and sorrowing for her misfortune, fainted. And Leontes, pierced to the heart by the news, began to feel pity for his unhappy queen, and he ordered Paulina and the ladies who were her attendants to take her away and use means for her recovery. Paulina soon returned and told the king that Hermione was dead. When Leontes heard that the queen was dead, he repented of his cruelty to her, and now that he thought his ill usage had broken Hermione's heart, he believed her innocent. And now he thought the words of the oracle were true, as he knew if that which was lost was not found, which he concluded was his young daughter, he should be without an heir, the young prince Mamillus being dead, and he would give his kingdom now to recover his lost daughter. And Leontes gave himself up to remorse, and passed many years in mournful thoughts and repentant grief. The ship in which Antigonus carried the infant princess out to sea was driven by a storm upon the coast of Bohemia, the very kingdom of the good king Polixenes. Here Antigonus landed, and here he left the little baby. Antigonus never returned to Sicily to tell Leontes where he had left his daughter, for he was going back to the ship, as he was going back to the ship, a bear came out of the woods and tore him to pieces. A just punishment on him for obeying the wicked order of Leontes. The child was dressed in rich clothes and jewels, for Hermione had made it very fine when she sent it to Leontes, and Antigonus had pinned a paper to its mantle, in the name of Perdita written thereon, the words obscurely imitating its high birth and untoward fate. This poor deserted baby was found by a shepherd. He was a humane man, and so he carried the little Perdita home to his wife, who nursed it tenderly. But poverty tempted the shepherd to conceal the rich prize he had found. Therefore he left that part of the country, and no one might know where he got his riches. And with part of Perdita's jewels he bought herds of sheep, and became a wealthy shepherd. He brought up Perdita as his own child, and she knew not she was any other than a shepherd's daughter. So there's a lot more to the story, but we're going to pause again and take a look at some more information. So Perdita, this name is related to Perdit or Perditor, meaning destroyer. Now, I think we typically associate the concept of destruction with something negative, but destruction sometimes is necessary for creation. First, there has to be an undoing before there can be something better in its place. And that's the essence or the spirit that I would like for us to keep in mind with regards to her name. And so also I found Perditas as well as Perdita, meaning ruined, done for, hopeless, or lost. Very appropriate, right? And then we have Antigonus. I found Antigone, who in the Latin dictionary here is related to, or in a story as a character, Antigone, the daughter of Laomedon, changed into a stork. So I thought, okay, think about this. Antigonus was the one who brought Perdita to this new place. So to relate him to a stork is very appropriate. So the next part of the story, I'm going to kind of summarize for you all. So she grows up in this foster family, essentially, the family that adopts her, the shepherd's family, and she winds up meeting the prince there, and she doesn't know that he's a prince, as far as I can recall. But remember that she is now no longer in her father's territory, Leontes' territory, but now she's actually in his former friend's territory because they were both kings, right? So this is the king of Bohemia. So that's her new land that she's a part of. And so Polixenes has a son, and that's who she meets and falls in love with. So his name is Florizel, and we know that flor is related to flowers, as well as blooming, or I would say the essence of becoming, or the energy of becoming. I think that the meaning behind the names that Shakespeare chose, I don't think it was just coincidence. I think that he intentionally chose these names personally to amplify and drive home the meaning of the story. You know, they're kind of like fun puzzles or riddles to dig into. You know, you have the surface story for people who just don't want to put the time in to do deep thinking, and that's fine. But then for those of us who are the ones who want to dig in deep and find deeper truth, we're seekers in that way. It blesses us with layers and layers of meaning and of lessons, right? So yes, Florizel, I look at flor as related to flowers, as well as blooming and the essence of becoming. Okay. And I want to say this too. You know, there's many, if you think about it, many fairy tales throughout time share a common theme of a princess being lost, or sometimes orphaned, you know. But the point here is that in these stories, what's common is that the princess, either she doesn't know her true lineage, or everyone else doesn't know her true lineage, right? Or both. So if you think about that, consider that we are described, especially through the Christian lens, we are described as the bride of Christ, right? So you might consider humanity, both on the large scale, the macro scale, as well as each one of us on the micro scale, as being represented in these stories by the maiden, you know, something to think about. So in the story, Florizel, who is, remember, Polixenes' son, the prince, right? He disguises himself as he's going to the shepherd's house as Doricles. And I think he does this just to prevent, you know, any further drama, because he's supposed to be associating with, you know, people of his same status, social status, or class or whatever, which is pretty common in these older cultures. But the way this goes down, I'm going to read a little bit more, but let me just kind of give you guys a summary. So what happens is Polixenes discovers, Polixenes is watching this young maiden converse with Doricles, right? But Doricles is disguising himself. And so he discovers what's going on. In other words, that's the whole of it. And he commands his son to stop seeing Perdita. He's like, this is a shepherd's. I mean, he uses like all these slanderous terms, I forget what they are, but the point is, he's like, this is a shepherd's daughter. You can't continue seeing her. So we're going to see how Camillo, once again, the warrior, intercedes and befriends the young lovers. So let's take a look at another portion of the story here. So if you have the book, we're going to be looking at page 45. So it says, the kind-hearted Camillo was charmed with the spirit and propriety of Perdita's behavior, because she was very humble and she was accepting the situation even though it was difficult. And perceiving that the young prince was too deeply in love to give up his mistress at the command of his royal father, he thought of a way to befriend the lovers, and at the same time to execute a favorite scheme he had in mind. This kind of reminds me of that trickster archetype that we see in a lot of stories too. It's like, depending on who you ask, he's a good guy or a bad guy. Like right now, this would really probably tick his dad off, to find out, like, I can't believe you're going behind my back and trying to, implement this scheme and against my orders. You see what I'm saying? But in the end, we see that what he did was the right thing. And it had the best outcome for everyone. So you might consider that Camillo may be a trickster archetype. Something to think about. Okay. Camillo had long known that Leontes, the king of Sicily, was become a true penitent. And although, in other words, remember Camillo was the first king, Leontes, he was his counsel. He was his right-hand man. And then he helped Polixenes escape death and persecution and all this stuff. Well, I mean, what more is there than death? But persecution first, I guess. And then to be poisoned or whatever. He helped Polixenes escape. And then he became his right-hand man, see. And so, but he found out that Leontes was very regretful of what he did. And so it says, and though Camillo was now the favored friend of King Polixenes, he could not help wishing once more to see his late royal master and his native home. He therefore proposed to Florizel and Perdita that they should accompany him to the Sicilian court, where he would engage Leontes should protect them, till through his mediation, important term, he's a mediator, not just a counselor and a friend, but a mediator. So he's going to engage Leontes, should protect them, till through his mediation they could obtain pardon from Polixenes and his consent to their marriage. To this proposal they joyfully agreed, and Camillo, who conducted everything relative to their flight, allowed the old shepherd to go along with them. The shepherd took with him the remainder of Perdita's jewels, her baby clothes, and the paper which he had found pinned to her mantle. So, yes. So I'm going to summarize a little bit more of what happens next. So they make it there, they make it back to Sicily, and they meet with Leontes. Leontes discovers that Perdita is his long-lost daughter. It's a beautiful reunion. However, he's still grieving the loss of his wife. And then at this point, Paulina comes into the scene, and she has a beautiful statue to show Leontes. And they're all together, right? Except for Polixenes at this point. But he winds up finding out that they fled to Sicily, so he winds up chasing them over there. Okay, but everybody else is there, together with Leontes, watching this go down with Paulina and the statue. So the statue that Paulina presents to Leontes is of his late wife, Hermione, and it's incredibly lifelike. And he's just feeling, even more so tortured and just super regretful and sorrowful and all this, right? And it goes into all these details about this experience for Leontes. It's very drawn out and emotional and all this. Okay. And we get to see how Perdita is looking upon this statue of her mother, and she's like, seeing herself in her mother, and she knows that she is indeed, her daughter, just by the familiarity, and how they look. Okay. So, let me pick up here. It's Paulina then ordered some slow and solemn music which she had prepared for the purpose to strike up, and to the amazement of all beholders, the statue came down from off the pedestal and threw its arms around Leontes' neck. The statue then began to speak, praying for blessings on her husband and on her child, the newly found Perdita. No wonder that the statue hung upon Leontes' neck and blessed her husband and her child. No wonder. For the statue was indeed Hermione herself, the living queen. Paulina had falsely reported to the king the death of Hermione, thinking that the only means to preserve her royal mistress's life. And with the good Paulina, Hermione had lived ever since, never choosing Leontes should know she was still living, till she heard Perdita was found. For though she had long forgiven the injuries which Leontes had done to herself, she could not pardon his cruelty to his infant daughter. His dead queen thus restored to life, his lost daughter found. The long-sorrowing Leontes could scarcely support the excess of his own happiness. Nothing but congratulations and affectionate speeches were heard on all sides. Now the delighted parents thanked Prince Florizel for loving their lowly-seeming daughter, and now they blessed the good old shepherd for preserving their child. Greatly did Camillo and Paulina rejoice that they had lived to see so good an end of all their faithful services. And as if nothing should be wanting to complete the strange and unlooked-for joy, King Polixenes himself now entered the palace. When Polixenes first missed his son and Camillo, knowing that Camillo had long wished to return to Sicily, he conjectured he should find the fugitives here, and following them with all speed, he happened to arrive just at this, the happiest moment of Leontes' life. Polixenes took a part in the general joy. He forgave his friend Leontes the unjust jealousy he had conceived against him, and they once more loved each other with all the warmth of their first boyish friendship. And there was no fear that Polixenes would now oppose his son's marriage with Perdita. She was no sheep-hook now, but the heiress of the crown of Sicily. Thus have we seen the patient virtues of the long-suffering Hermione rewarded. That excellent lady lived many years with her Leontes and her Perdita, the happiest of mothers and of queens. And that's the story. So let's share some more thoughts about it here. If you think about it, there's still one tragedy that, well, first of all, two really. Paulina's husband was killed, but remember, this opportunity that presented itself to him when Leontes said, "Hey, take my daughter," and leave her abandoned on a shore. Well, that opportunity showed his true character. And then he was destroyed by a bear, right? I'm sure there's all kind of additional symbolism we could dive into if we have the time. But there was that. But as far as like a tragedy, I'm thinking about the son of Leontes and Hermione. Remember, he actually did die. And so let's take a look at the symbolism there, okay? His name was Mamillus. So we know that mammal is related to the breast or a nursing infant, right? So a baby in infancy. So energetically, spiritually speaking, we're talking about being spiritually immature. To me, once again, this is a story of maturity, a story of learning, of making mistakes, of growth, and leaving behind childish ways. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the good qualities. It's like the Bible says, when you become a man or a woman, when you mature spiritually, you put off. You're no longer a child. You're a man. You're not a child. But yet it also says to return to the kingdom of heaven, or to enter the kingdom of heaven, we must return to being as a child, right? So it's very subtle. Excuse me. Water break. Hang on. We're talking about very subtle differences on the surface, but very profound differences when you look deeper, right? So to me, again, this is a story of maturity, spiritually speaking, where we're keeping the qualities of the good qualities of childhood, of imagination and the spirit of creation, which is straight from the Heavenly Father, the Creator Himself. That has to be a good thing. But we're putting off the immature qualities of jealousy, and it's deeper than that, even more so to me. And I'm going off my script, my notes here. Maybe I shouldn't, but there's more to it as far as how this maturity develops, spiritually speaking. Let me just say that, and then we'll look deeper. Okay. So we see also the virtue of patience exemplified in the character of Hermione, and we see the character of humility exemplified in Perdita. But most importantly, we see this dedication to doing the right thing despite the risks in Camillo, the warrior character, right? The mediator, the friend, the helper who fights for you, which is always present in these legends and folklore and fairy tales. The helpers are always there. So, and I saw a video the other day. I haven't got much into it, but it's I think it's an audio recording of a book I'd never heard of before, but I'll drop a link to it. It's about the helpers, spiritual helpers, which are, again, present in all these myths throughout time. So I'll drop a link to that in the description. I have no idea if it's a good book or not, but it's something I want to listen to here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. But yeah, again, Camillo means warrior. And I feel like his character in the story exemplifies what it means to put faith into action, despite the fact that he could have chosen fear, and he could have complied like Antigonus, right? He could have complied with orders like Antigonus and done the right thing per the orders, but the wrong thing morally, see, but he didn't do that. So he was a warrior, and he chose to be committed to the right thing, okay? And this is faith in action. So he also made everything happen. So who was he? Who was Camillo? He was the advisor. And he wasn't just the advisor to one person. He was everybody's advisor. He was first the advisor to Leontes, his right-hand man, and then it was Polixenes, and then at the end of it, he was the friend to Perdita and Florizel, and the advisor, right? And the mediator, all of it. And the result of him doing everything that he did, making it all happen in a good way, is that in the end of the story, there is reconciliation, there's forgiveness, and there's peace, all good things, right? So let me just encourage you by saying this. I think that Camillo represents this spiritual essence that we all have within us. And again, instead of acting out of fear, if we can be patient enough when we do have trials come our way, if we have patience enough to consult this inner guidance, right, and furthermore to believe it, then we're going to experience the best outcome. Sometimes if we do things ourselves, it's an okay outcome. It's okay. Sometimes it's a really, really bad outcome. But again, if we are willing to discern and believe this inner guidance, then we can, and it's always going to be founded in peace and all good things, y'all, then we're going to see the best outcome. So I think it's really interesting that the oracle, Leontes had such faith in the oracle. And yet when the two lords of the court, or whatever it is in the story, when they came back with the news from the oracle, Leontes didn't believe it. So belief is a huge, huge part of all this, right? In other words, think about this. This really made an impression on me earlier when I was making my notes. It took Camillo, the warrior, putting faith into action. You might even relate this to miracles, okay, to prove the validity of the oracle's message. Now, the names of the two Sicilian lords that were sent by Leontes to the oracle, let's take a look at them. Cleomenes is related to a king, and we have Dion, who is related to God. So we're talking about a message from God not being believed. Not being believed. So there has to be this helper. There has to be this mediator who proves the message to be true. And so you might say that miracles occurred in this story. And so if you think about it, sometimes we have to be shown the truth to believe in it, don't we? So the question is, will we believe the proof and let beautiful outcomes blossom in our life? Or will we require more challenging chapters to complete our book? How long will it take? How long will it take, to trust it and to believe it? So, at the very end, let me share this with you all too. So I was looking up, I forget what Apollo in my dictionary here. And there was a word, apologus, or apolog, and apologus. I'm thinking of apology, which actually means story or fable. And you think about the regret, how apologetic Leontes was for his mistakes, and how the story just progressed and went on and on and on because of one poor choice after another, until the ending, which is the good ending. So I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope it got the wheels turning for you. I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I'm sorry that I got it out later today than I had intended, but I still hope you enjoy it. And I have a full battery now, so I'll probably film the rest of my thoughts today. I try, if I've got the time and I'm inspired and I have the battery life on my phone and all this good stuff, I try to go ahead and pump out the messages that I feel like God puts on my heart. It's like, okay, then it feels right to go ahead and put these out now, because there's going to be times when I just have, just life happening, stuff to do, house to clean, groceries to buy, and all this random stuff like everybody. But so that's why the flood videos today. But I hope you enjoyed it very much. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you feel called to share them. And I just hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.